I'd like to introduce this fireside chat, and very happy to see many of you. We brought this together for you under the umbrella of We're Better Together, which is Generate's wellbeing program focusing on founder wellness. We would like to provide you with interesting conversations, tools, and resources as part of Generate's core offering to understand and prioritize mental health and wellbeing as a founder. And this is why we're here today in the company of Markus, who is an LSE alumni and a founder in the mental health sector. So without further ado, welcome. And would you like to introduce yourself to our audience and let them know a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Markus. I graduated from the LSE back in 2013 with a master's in management strategy. I currently run a startup, like you explained, within the area of mental health. And had you told me back then, when I was still at the LSE, that I would one day be a founder, an entrepreneur, and in particular been an entrepreneur in the area of mental health, I probably stared at you in disbelief. This was just so completely new to me. Or mental health is something that's very new to me, and up until a couple of years ago, not something I spent a lot of time thinking about. But I learned my lessons. Before Feelmo, I spent my career at Google, where I was in sales for 2 years, and then working at an investment bank in Sweden for 5 years before I got burnt out pretty badly. I realized that I had mental health and that's something I have to take care of. But I guess we're going to get back into this. Fun fact, like LJ, I also got a puppy during Corona. So I have 2 dogs, engaged, living in London, and really excited to be here and to talk about areas that have become very, that I care passionately about now, just mental health in general, and in particular mental health for founders.
I think that's like the set of experiences so many of us can resonate with. And is there sort of something that you would want to lay out there and say, that's something I've learned along the way, and you kind of wish someone would have told you that graduating from LSE, that's the path, like that's the kind of lessons that you need to learn on the way?
Definitely. Like there are, so many different lessons and so many things that I wish maybe someone had taught me or told me about earlier. And definitely mental health is of course one of the biggest ones for me, seeing as it was something that it was just not something I thought about. And I was very fortunate. I grew up in a very loving family, but it's feelings, mental health, it wasn't something that we talked about. So it wasn't something that I was particularly used to. A couple of years ago, I would have probably said that I was proud to be a very rational person who didn't do emotions, thinking that meant that's something that would have been considered negative. So I think mental health and why prioritize that, what it's all about, how it's part of your, of course, your just overall well-being, but how it's also part of your, your ability to perform and your ability to work. So that's an area that I can talk for ages about, and that I wish someone had told me, 10 years ago, so I would have avoided the pitfalls that I fall into.
You've mentioned burnout. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, go for it.
No, you mentioned burnout, and it's really one of those words that you hear a lot, but you don't actually know how it kind of comes about and what can you do about it once it has already happened, or how to prevent it maybe. Could you tell us a little bit more about burnout itself?
Yeah, sure. I think preventing burnout, the step, first of all, you're definitely right. Prevention is so much easier than curing. So focusing on how to prevent something like that, burnout affecting you is critical. Number one is just taking care of your mental health. And again, something that I wish I had been instructed or told about at an earlier age, because it is something, we're supposed to last for a very long time if you think about our careers, and thinking back to how I used to to work, you just think that you're kind of invincible. You can just work for hours, but you actually have to stop and think about it and take care of your mental health just as much as you do your physical health. So I think that's like one of the key ways of really ensuring or preventing burnout is always making sure that you're prioritizing and taking care of your mental health. One thing that really struck me after I burnt out was, and I started, I was very fortunate. I was able to speak with a therapist, Elizabeth, who a lovely woman who I'm so grateful that I had an opportunity to speak with, and she'd been focusing on burnout for her entire career. So she'd been working in this for 20 plus years, and what was so frightening that she shared was that she felt that every year the cases and the clients coming to her with burnout, it was just occurring earlier and earlier in people's career, which is terrifying. Because if you fresh out of school and then you start your first job, and then within half a year or a year you burnt out, you probably still have to work for another year, or the idea is that you're supposed to be working for another 30 years, 40 years. How do we counteract that? And I think back to your original questions, like how do we avoid burnout? There's so many different things that we need to be thinking about. For you as an individual, again, it's really prioritizing your mental health, and recognizing when you might have enough on your plate, and that's not only limited to your work, but also your personal life, in your relationships, with your family. Really maintaining this balance. Yeah, I think if I can follow one more thing that I'd like to add when it comes to burnout, in particular, I guess when it comes to founders, is recognizing a little bit more that it's very easy to push yourself very hard, but again, you have to last, and your startup has to last for your startup to really be have a chance of succeeding. It's a long game, so you can't push yourself. You can definitely not push your employees so hard that they burn out. And I think that's like a responsibility on you as a founder to take care of both yourself, that you're kind of practicing what you preach as well, and making sure that anyone that you're working with, employees or advisors or consultants or partners or whatever it is, that they're also that you're encouraging them to take care of their mental health as well.
So how do I know that I'm experiencing burnout? Because there's just because you kind of feel, oh, I'm feeling a little bit down, I'm feeling exhausted, but oh, it's because I've got so much work to do. Is there like a way or a combination of feelings where you have to start thinking, okay, I think this is bigger than what I thought it is?
To be honest, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of people that I've spoken with who have experienced burnout, one thing that many have in common is that they shared this experience of waking up, laying in bed, and just being physically unable to get out of bed, and not the idea of going to work, the idea of starting your day is just so off-putting for them, where they just like there's something holding them back. I didn't have that experience. So for me, it crept up on me, so much so that I when I started seeing a therapist, I thought I went there to talk about a relationship that I was in, and it was so mind-boggling. I was so fascinated that when I was speaking to this therapist, that the only thing on my mind, the only thing I wanted to talk about was work, and how frustrated I was at work, and how unhappy it made me, and how unhappy I was with myself for remaining in this job. So it's very difficult to say exactly what is that combination that says that this is burnout. I think it really is different for different people, but I think if you're waking up multiple days in a row where you're feeling exhausted and unhappy, then you should probably slow down and really check in with yourself, and see how you're doing, and if this is burnout or not. And I guess I would say it's better to be cautious and check in sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I guess I really liked Angela's comment in the chat box that usually people around you might see it like earlier than you do, because you kind of, there's all this kind of self like defense mechanisms that tells you, oh, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have that experience as well. Like it was interesting. One of my colleagues, at, my previous job, where you have these like 360 reviews where everyone can, is providing feedback on each other. And I had a senior colleague who had recognized that it was probably time for someone to check in with me, because during the fall before I really burnt out, they had just recognized that I was like shifting in like my energy, my like mindset towards work, and my colleagues, like that was shifting. And I kind of wish that this colleague kind of intervened earlier rather than waiting for a 360 review. But definitely right with Angela's comment there, that it's your colleagues, your friends, and they can also see it.
And let's not forget, it is a pandemic, so emotions are heightened. Everyone it seems like everyone's talking about well-being and mental health, but is it really a sort of a good shift, or are we talking about it the right way, or is it one of those things that get heightened by a pandemic, but only some elements of it get amplified and others get forgotten?
I think it's really early to, it's a little too early to say. I think one of the very few very good things with COVID has, I think, really been the shift in people's view on mental health. It's definitely become a priority for so many people. I've spoken to a lot of investors who are all saying that they now are like definitely focusing on mental health and are very interested in it. My dad finally understands what I'm doing and why I'm interested in mental health. And the same goes for several of my former colleagues, finally understanding why maybe mental health is so interesting and why it's so important. But I think it's hard to say what the long-term consequences are going to be. I think this is a shift, and it's hard to, I think, completely forget about this. But I definitely hope that this continues, and then that the interest for mental health continues just to increase. Because I would say, even if we've had all these changes, even if more people are talking about mental health, the stigma associated with it is still huge. And I know people are struggling talking about this at work with their families. So there's a lot of work that remains to be done. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry. Would you like to kind of stick towards LJ's question just for a moment? Just like, how do you plan to sort of take care of your employees as Feelmo grows? I know we are going to talk about Feelmo a little bit more, but if you have some sort of thoughts on that.
Yeah, sorry, was the question how I prioritize this?
Yeah, it's how would you prioritize your employees' well-being?
Yeah, I think number one is just, or like the two things I'd say are talking about it and being very open about this, that this, me as personally talking about my own struggles and how I'm feeling, to that way open up and make, my colleagues or anyone I work with also feel comfortable opening up and sharing their own experiences. I think that's, a bare minimum. But yeah, it's with that said, it's still something that I know often goes forgotten or is skipped, or you fall into this bad habit of just saying that everything is good until it's not good. So I think that's one of like my priorities. And secondly, it's also not only creating that space for people to be open, but actively checking in and making sure that that you create that space for people to open up. And it is difficult. So, I have a colleague and we work completely remotely. So you don't have those natural interactions that you used to have before when you typically would meet someone at a co-working spot, or you'd meet someone in the office, where you can kind of pick up on more subtle notes. But so running a more remote team, I think you have to be a lot more proactive in making sure that you're, focusing on this and creating space for it.
Yeah, I guess it ties in really well to kind of talk a little bit more about Feelmo and Feelmo's approach to sort of mental health and well-being. How do you imagine sort of your app and your contribution to this space?
Yeah. So Feelmo was originally really a solution that when I was thinking back to my own experiences with burnout and my struggles with mental health, I tried finding a solution that would have helped me. And it was something that I always struggled very much with was really being able to communicate my feelings. So, if someone would ask me, "How are you? How are you?" My answer would be good. Sometimes my answer would be not good, but most of the cases it would be good. And I've come to realize that those aren't really feeling words. So they're not very descriptive. They're not very helpful. They're not very validating. And there's so much research that really just research that supports that the more precisely that you can describe your feelings, that has a huge relieving effect both on you, even if you recognize that you're feeling frustrated or misunderstood. These might be typically unpleasant feelings, but at least you know what's going on for you. So as I was trying to understand like what I wanted to do in the area of mental health and like what solution would work for me, I developed something that would help people better identify their feelings by really just a simple solution that's giving options. That's something that my partner showed me. So when I was struggling with being able to identify my feelings, she'd just give me a piece of paper with a bunch of different words to choose from. And that simple solution was, incredibly helpful. But, it's not very convenient to have a piece of paper in your pocket or relying on that. So I tried, the idea originally was really just moving that into your mobile phone that you already had in your phone. And then seeing what else you could do with that information once it's in an app. So that was the original idea for Feelmo, and that we launched to our beta users or MVP users last year. And through that process of talking to a lot of our users, and also through the process of me just learning more about mental health, and talking to a lot of therapists and talking to and doing more of my own research, you just realize that there's just a bigger need for mental health solutions in general than are available. So what we've seen with Feelmo is that there is a lot of interest in of course being able to identify and understand your feelings, but also understanding and knowing what to do with them. Now that you realize you might be feeling frustrated or misunderstood, how do you manage that feeling of misunderstood? How do you communicate that to your partner? So what we're trying to do with Feelmo is to really teach these two core mental health skills, which are self-awareness, being able to identify what's going on for you, and emotional management, knowing how to manage each and every situation or feeling.
So, like you said, you founded Feelmo recently, kind of almost at the doorstep of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Did that kind of affect, not just business plan, because business plans have all been affected by the pandemic, but in terms of your approach to kind of making sure that Feelmo is on the right path to kind of understand, like you said, the core goals, but also maybe that there is an even bigger need for something like Feelmo. How did that interact with the sort of the incoming plague?
Yeah. So I've been working on Feelmo for a couple of months, or for a while before COVID hit last year. But we actually released this first version of our app just a couple of weeks before the lockdowns in London. So the timing was, I guess it feels bad to say this, but for us, I guess it was okay, or not as affected. If anything, we'd probably be affected positively, because there are more people who are, of course, struggling with their mental health. So I'd say for one thing, it just that experience, or having COVID occur, and just reading about mental health and in the news so much, that was definitely very reinforcing for me. I guess coming from in my previous career where, you didn't really feel any purpose with what you were doing. And now knowing that I'm working on Feelmo, and I know that users are some of our users are finding Feelmo helpful to manage the feelings that are coming up related to the pandemic. That's of course incredibly rewarding and very energizing, and which just reinforces you to get more and more dedicated to Feelmo and trying to doing what you can for it to be just surviving and hopefully successful. I think the changes that it did make us, it did lead to some changes, and it was primarily, I guess, in that realizing that there's just a bigger need for mental health support. I think the problem was just a lot bigger than I really anticipated before I got started with Feelmo, and really that there were so many people struggling to get support. I know, I think we were in a crisis before COVID hit, but with COVID, if anything, it's just accelerated everything. And then the traditional support channels that were available, they weren't really available before COVID. If you're here in the UK, if you turn to the NHS to get support, you'll be stuck in lines, in months-long lines. And even if you have the financial capacity to pay for private care, even then you'd kind of be stuck waiting for care, because there really are just too few therapists. We aren't educating enough in the US. I know that there are more therapists leaving the workforce than there are joining the workforce, and I know that therapists as well definitely struggled in this last year with their own with their own well-being. So I think definitely reinforce that there's just a bigger need for more mental health solutions. And Feelmo is by no means like a replacement for mental health care that's offered by a therapist, but hopefully it can be an introduction. Which is our goal. So this can be an entry-level introduction for people who are new to taking care of their mental health.
It is just so important to know that, it's not just, I guess you are the evidence that people are listening and people come up with ideas to support the work of therapists, and, actually kind of diversifying the field where people can look for help. So it is really, really reassuring that, everyone is just going to have a lot more options from now on, and it's just on us to make sure that people know about these options as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, there are definitely a lot of struggles in the area, but in general, someone said there are like 5 to 1,000 mental health apps in the App Store, and I think that's great. I think there's not going to be one solution that's going to work for everyone. I think we have to make sure that these solutions that we're putting out there, that they're validated and that they work, that they're based on science. But in general, I think we're going to need a multitude of different services or solutions that are going to cater to people in different situations and with different needs. So I think it's just positive. And it also just, I think every solution that comes out there, we're all trying to do our part to normalize seeking mental health care. And I think that is all, hugely important as well and beneficial for everyone in general.
Yeah, I guess it's one of our agenda as well, with the sort of new mental health and wellbeing program here at Generate, to make sure that founders and entrepreneurs realize that mental health and well-being should be at the core of their life and their business, because they are humans at the end of the day facing very, very similar problems. And let's be honest, entrepreneurship is not easy because you're working on your own in a very small team, odd hours, so it is really, really good to sort of have an entrepreneur talk about the importance of this, because that's kind of where people will actually kind of realize, oh, I feel the same way. We can connect on this level. We have a question in the chat about the sort of COVID situation and remote working, especially. How have you stopped yourself from burning out as a founder? especially when the sort of line between work and life is so often blurred. And it just gets amplified by the fact that you are in the same room throughout the whole day.
Yeah. I wish I had a good answer. And it's very difficult. I think in startup like lingo, a lot of people talk about something called like hustle culture. And I think that's very important. Maybe this goes back a little to LJ's question, like what we're doing to take care of mental health internally. It's like that. I think, you know, fighting or going against hustle culture, the idea of that is very important. So that's, I mean, one thing we're doing. I don't know, for me, what's helped is really disconnecting, knowing that but at the end of the day, like somewhat trying to keep to regular office hours, or you know, some routine that comes to work, so that you know, even if you're still working in the day, you know, you're working and yeah, spending all the time in the same room, that you're kind of trying to separate it, so you do have space for yeah, more like non-work activities, and you can disconnect. I think that disconnection part is so important. I'm, you know, very fortunate. I have my 2 dogs. I have my partner, that I'm able to like engage in other activities that really, you know, that fulfill me, and that has been very helpful to you know, for me to shift, to shift my mindset, or to go into another place. That's been helpful. But I mean, definitely, it's I have like felt these, you know, these sensations of burnout, and I kind of like almost laughed at myself when I was pushing myself too hard, and realizing that it's quite ironic to be running a mental health startup and then burning out while doing it. So I think when I noticed that, I took the day off. I took the rest of the day off. So I think that's another important part.
Yeah, definitely. I do read questions out from the chat, but if you would like to, if anyone from the audience would like to ask it in person, feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. This is like a relatively small group, so I think we'll manage. But until LJ's question from the chat is that, how do you explain to parents, older generations, what mental health and well-being is, when getting stressed, feeling exhausted, etc., is seen as part of life and something you need to accept, especially as a founder? How do you achieve that breakthrough with your own dad, mum, relatives?
I mean, LJ, that's a tough one. I think, yeah, I'm just trying to think back to, like, I mean, my own situation. Like, my dad is, you know, I love my dad. He's a fantastic person, but he's not very, you know, in touch with, you know, emotions and his own mental health, and where he is like, you know, one coping strategy, which is, you know, ignorance, or just being positive. I mean, he's definitely come around that, you know, the more you talk about him and you talk about these items, these, you know, these topics, I think he's come around and understands it more. Talking about, I mean, pointing out, you know, unhelpful coping strategies. I think by that way, it's like you're really introducing mental health, you know, like you do, like you do to a child, is really, you know, understanding what is going on for you, and then like, what should we do with this feeling, and then normalizing all types of feelings. Like, I know my dad is a very positive person, so, you know, if he's, you know, if I know, if I've seen him, like if he's had a tough day, or if he's going through something difficult, like he'll almost like just shrug it off and then go on. While, you know, if you kind of point out to him like, well, you had this feeling, and, you know, you kind of stop and you talk to him about it, and he does open up about it. So I think it's just having these conversations. And I think this is very different for, I mean, you know, children and adults. I think children are almost easier. Like, they might have more tantrums, difficulty communicating, but essentially, you know, you can introduce them to feelings, and Yeah, I'm not an expert at kids. I don't have kids, so I don't really know how you'd go about doing that. And I do have parents, but I'm not an expert on how to convince them or how to introduce them to mental health either. But yeah, so definitely still working on that one. All tips are welcome. Maybe I should add that.
I can testify that it is a tough job, especially sort of when having parents who have like very strong sort of deflecting strategies. I was sort of.
I think maybe, sorry if I can just add one thing. Like, I guess it's just realizing that they are probably, I mean, yeah, I guess just having like patience, and that they are, how they are due to like the circumstances at their time. And they're probably a lot more emotional or in tune with their emotions and mental health compared to their parents. So I think maybe just having, well, that's what I tell myself at least, is just remembering, to have people more compassionate and mindful, and trying to realize what they've gone through, and that they're just, like everyone, just doing the best they can given their circumstances.
Anyone's got any questions from the audience that they would like to ask in person?
I think Camilla's just popped a question in there. Thanks, Camilla.
Yes, Camilla is curious whether you have experienced differences in an approach towards dealing with mental health issues in the workplace, for example, in Sweden and the UK.
So I think I worked in Google, then I was in Ireland, and then I worked in my investment bank in Sweden. So I do have some I guess experience in this question, but I think the different industries are like more explain a bigger difference. So I think when I was at Google, there were a lot more resources dedicated towards mental health, and this was several years ago. But there was there was a lot more focus on employee well-being compared to when I worked at an investment bank in Sweden, where there was a lot more of this hustle culture, this idea that you just power through, this mentality that you can work as much as you have to work as much as your boss tells you, and like sleep is unnecessary. You can catch up on that when you're on vacation. I don't want to say too much. Like, I don't know if I can make any conclusions on the differences between Sweden and the UK. I think the UK is mental health in the workplace is probably more normalized in the UK than it is in Sweden, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah.
Patrick, fire away if you'd like to ask.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks a lot for the presentation. It's been really insightful, and I think I can relate to a lot of what you said there, Markus, as well. And nice to see you again. I'm not sure if you remember me, but
definitely, yeah.
Nice to see you again. Yeah. So I was just thinking in terms of Feelmo, and you already talked a bit about it, but I really liked what you said about being evidence-based and kind of with the mindset of what would I have liked when I was in that situation, like what would help me. So I'm just curious how you see like moving forward. What are other like a vision for the app, or other aspects that you're thinking about bringing into the solution, whether it's bringing it to workplaces or incorporating other types of practices into the app or whatever it might be. I'm just curious.
Yeah, thank you. And I definitely, it's great seeing you again. It was a long time ago. I think, yeah, like I said, so Feelmo was originally something that I was developing to kind of like help me with my own problems, to identify my feelings. I've noticed now, as we're kind of transitioning into more more supportive app, and more, not going to say, giving recommendations, but more helpful, and, helping, offering more support, offering more, resources to the user. We've kind of left my own like area of expertise as a user. So now we're more dependent on therapists. So I'm excited to hopefully be bringing on board a therapist to be working with Feelmo, because I think that's, back to this evidence-based. I think it is very important that anything that we are putting out there, that we make sure that this is actually helpful, and that our users are engaging with it in a helpful way. To answer your question of like where we're going, where the vision is, I really think, again, I don't think Feelmo is not a replacement for therapists, but reflecting back on my experience of burnout, and my experience and having my 15 hours of therapy with Elizabeth, there were a lot of aspects there that probably we could have done, that we could have done differently. Elizabeth, with all her knowledge and experience, she should maybe have spent more of her time with clients with more serious conditions or more serious illnesses. I know in the US, approximately 40% of young adults with serious mental illnesses don't get any support. So there's a clear need that therapists maybe should need to focus on those with more serious illnesses. And then the idea with Feelmo, or the vision with Feelmo, is that this can be a complement or a replacement for entry-level care, which would then free up capacity for therapists. And instead of me then, after my burnout, spending 15 hours with Elizabeth, maybe 10 hours would have been sufficient, or 5 hours. I hope that answers your question. Cool. Thanks. And thanks for coming.
Yeah, that is very good to talk about, like where to kind of take things in the future. And sort of related to that, but more sort of generally, what I was kind of thinking about, especially lately, as the UK reopens and now we're going to pubs again, the whole kind of slogan of going back to normal, do you see any dangers in that?
I think, it's very weird. I think I can kind of feel this in like myself, that we have like the strong urge to just return to normal, return to, March, or, what things were like in March 2020. But I think that's not really, obviously it's not possible. And I think, honestly, it's not really desirable. Again, we mentioned, before, about these shifts in mindsets when it comes to mental health. I really hope that these are lasting, and that we continue to prioritize our mental health, and that's something that we're going to be continuing, that employers continue to invest in going forward, and that people continue talking about it going forward. So I think, it's very interesting. Obviously, when you're out walking about the town, you see people, it feels, there's so much excitement. You can almost like touch the excitement and the optimism that people have, I guess, after this, these long lockdowns, and after the this winter. It makes sense that people are, really jubilant, or really happy and excited, and I think maybe that's rightly so. So I imagine that's going to continue, but it'll be interesting to see what happens, I guess, after the summer, when we come back, not to say to normal, but we come back to, fingers crossed that the pandemic is under control, and people are coming back to some semblance of, work. What that new normal is going to look like, who knows? But it'll be interesting to see how people cope with whatever's going on then, and with all these expectations that we had for what life would be like after the pandemic. All these promises that we'd made, we're going to live differently. We might move, we might do this. Let's see what happens. I think it's also, I do want to add one note of caution. I think we definitely should be careful when it comes to talking about returning to normal, because there are a lot of aspects that we don't want to return to normal, and we should be aware of those.
Partially why I was asking, because for me, even the idea of normal, what is normal, and really just personally experiencing, lockdown easing, and just meeting a friend in the park on a single day, which is something you used to do on a regular basis, but then the end of it, you just feel so drained and exhausted, which is something you've never felt before. And that kind of whole idea of this should be normal, or will I get used to it, will it go away, etc. The idea of normalcy, I think, is just so much more complicated. than just like the whole slogan of it of like, oh, we're going to go back to normal in a couple of months.
Yeah. Definitely, I agree with you. It's like, I guess we do have to be like careful and kind of cautious. You know, we shouldn't push ourselves just because, you know, you can go out and maybe, you know, your friends want to go out. You know, people still have different, you know, levels of tolerance and what they're feeling comfortable with. And I think we should be like mindful and respectful of that.
Definitely. Anyone's got any more questions that they want to present? Kavita?
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Marcus. It's been super interesting so far.
Hi,
my question, how did you acquire your first few users for Feelmo? And do you see yourself going down, you know, kind of a B2B route, getting companies to offer it as a benefit, like some wellness companies have been doing so far?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for being here. And thanks for the great questions. The first couple of users that we found, I guess, were just, you know, I started off trying to start with your network, and which is complicated because they're not necessarily, at least my network with a lot of, you know, investment bankers, are not very helpful. But it was, you know, part of a co-working space here in London. So, you know, start there, you can talk to some users. I you know, I definitely found it difficult. Is like mental health is something difficult to talk about, and it's also, so when you create an app that is, you know, asking people about their mental health, I found I definitely struggled getting feedback because I felt really uncomfortable asking users about their feedback, and like, how was your experience? Like, you know, how are you feeling? And, you know, they could be going through some difficult things that they might be uncomfortable sharing with me. But yeah, but the users that I spoke to, I found that they were very helpful, and they obviously, like, if they were willing to speak with me, I think they cared somewhat about the product, so they did have a lot of feedback. So yeah, so I found people in the co-working spot. I did some like really entry level, like low level, like marketing on Facebook. That was very helpful as well in the beginning to get some traction or some interested people, and also understand kind of where your interest, where it was. I think you had was there a second part of the question?
Yeah. So I was just kind of, because, you know, things like Calm.
Oh yes,
yeah, they're offering it as a benefit now.
Yeah, we've so far really focused on the user experience. It feels, I don't know, as someone who has been on the receiving end of a lot of like weird benefits, or, you know, a lot of benefits have been introduced to us, but never really, I can't remember, you know, when I was at Google or when I was at this investment bank, that I ever really used these benefits. Instead, you know, HR would send you an email saying like, now we have access to this or that. So instead, what we wanted to do is focus more on the user and making sure that we're creating something that the users enjoy using, or finding engaging and helpful. And then second, after that, we're focusing more on like how we're going to get this out to users. At the moment, we're focusing more, not so much on employers, but university students is definitely a very interesting target user group, as well as people who already go to therapy. These are people who, you know, very, you know, are struggling with their mental health. They do have access to a support channel through their therapist, who they might be seeing on a weekly, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. So they're very lucky in that sense. But, you know, they're still struggling with their mental health on a daily basis. So looking for support in between sessions.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
I have a question that sort of ties into that a little bit in terms of user experience, because I know that on your like Instagram, you share like TikTok videos, for example. Is this something that you find particularly important to kind of enter like platforms and the different ways in which people interact in the online sphere and elsewhere, to kind of make sure that the users come from all parts of life?
Yeah, I think what we've seen, I guess, is just, which, I mean, with Feelmo, we do want to try to create some type of community. So we're trying to use primarily Instagram as a channel where users and just general followers can come and have access to helpful resources, but also fun mental health content. Like, everything doesn't have to be so serious. So we're trying to find like a good mix there. Besides Instagram, we do have a blog for a little slightly like more longer form content. And then, since a month back, we started experimenting with TikTok. And I think it's more of trying to test out different channels to see their response. And also to be where our users are. And I know TikTok has definitely exploded this last year, I'd say. So it's more I'd say it's more experimentation and putting out what we think is helpful content in different channels to attract future users and to engage our existing ones as well.
Yeah, I like that approach a lot, because I guess everything is being diversified at this point. It's not just Instagram's reign anymore. Really finding people wherever they are hiding, or not so much in hiding.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, there's also for us, like, I guess there's a benefit is like, Feelmo itself is a content app. So what we're trying is, keeping in mind is that a lot of the information that we're putting out in Instagram or TikTok, we can also kind of recycle that information, making it available inside the app as well. So it's all, it helps acquire new users, but also keep folks engaged as well.
Brilliant. We are sort of nearing the session, so if everyone has sort of last questions, something that they are eager to know, now is your time. If everyone found every answer for the questions they were looking for, would you like, Markus, to kind of give us like a couple of kind of last thoughts or takeaway points, something that you want all of us to take away from the session?
Well, I mean, just take care of yourselves. I think that's my number one. It's something that I've just for so long have never really done. I haven't done, and it's something I still struggle with. It's so difficult. My go-to coping strategy when it comes to difficult things is just to like buckle down and just to kind of survive or just move forward. And that is not, there are definitely times where that is a successful strategy, but that shouldn't be you're like the one that you're employing 90% of the time. Take care of yourselves. It's definitely what I'd say. I don't know if that makes any sense. And number two, would say if there are any entrepreneurs here or just anyone in general who wants to talk, if anything that I've said here has really resonated with them, and they'd like to talk more about it, or if they'd, are struggling in any way and I can be helpful, please reach out. I can drop my email here in the chat box, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about any of these topics in more detail and to be supportive in any way. I really care a lot about mental health, as I hope has become clear. I'm not a qualified person in this field yet, but I'm hoping to have wish to become that in the future. But with that said, and without qualifications, I'm very passionate about and wanting to be helpful. So, for anyone who's struggling, or and I guess in particular, any founder who's struggling with their well-being and mental health, please reach out, because it's a long game, and we have to survive. And lastly, I guess, thank you so much for having me and for inviting me to this. It's really, I'm very happy for this opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for coming. And kind of one last thing I would like to add to that is that, for everyone, talking about sort of mental health and well-being shouldn't be limited to these sessions. So really, just like Markus said, reaching out is such an important step towards kind of addressing issues with mental health and well-being. And if you are working with us at Generate as well, we are trying to cater an offering that really works for everyone. So, that's why, drop us an email if you think, okay, you're not really offering this yet, but me as a founder could really use this as a resource, then, just go for it, because this is the best way to kind of find out how we can help you. And not just, us kind of sitting down and thinking, okay, so based on personal experience, this is what I think people would need. But we are all very different and we all need very different things. So point at the end of the day is that just do let us know and reach out and talk to everyone you think could help you in this. And we're definitely those people. And we will be working with Markus a little bit more because he is part of our Gap Accelerator. So yeah, you should be seeing us a little bit more.
Very excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day.